Marta, welcome to DAO Talk. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, maybe you can just get us started by telling us a little bit about your background. What have you worked on? How did you kind of get into crypto and the space in the first place?
Well, I got into crypto by pure luck, I think. I have a PhD in computer science and security and privacy, and I always wanted to do security. And got involved with like the Tor project with a bunch of cyberpunks and people like that. And for reasons completely not connected to what I was doing professionally, I wanted to get more out into the Silicon Valley area. I basically fell in love with a guy, and I was offered a job as a security architect in this company that a friend of mine founded, along with a bunch of other people. And I was just like, well, I have this other job lined up that is really cool. So I'm not really sure, but let's catch up, have lunch. Let's see. And the other job that I was offered was way more senior. It's like VP of privacy. So really kind of different vibe. But we went to the lunch and he brought the team with him. And I was just like, this is crazy. Like guys in like bold leather jackets, blue hair, like all sort of like my type of people. And I was just like, okay, I want to work with you guys, no matter what it is. I don't understand. You talk about Bitcoin, like I heard that it's like for ransoms. I'm not really sure about that, but let's roll with it.
They're putting out good vibes.
Yeah, and that was Blockstream.
Cool.
So one of the biggest companies in the Bitcoin space. I joined as employee number 3 or something like that, so very early on, other than like 15 co-founders, but employee number 3.
There's a weird number of crypto organizations that have like an excessively large number of co-founders.
Yeah, and now with DAOs even like, it's one of 40 or one of 50 or something. So that was Blockstream, and then I kind of really got into the blockchain more than Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. I really fell in love with the beauty of what blockchain can do for humanity and how all the social implications of it and so on. And so very quickly, after about 2 years, I moved over to Hyperledger that was being founded back then under the Linux Foundation, the Hyperledger Foundation, or Hyperledger project. And that was where I started leading the ecosystem there, building enterprise relationships and so on, which I kind of left a year and a half ago. So after 5 years of doing just that, I moved into the community and DAO space where I'm right now.
Awesome. Sounds like you've, met a lot of amazing people and had an amazing journey in the crypto space. I think we kind of like all end up in crypto by accident one way or another.
Yeah, you just stumble upon it. These days it's just impossible not to. It's everywhere.
It's true. But you have to be like a certain type of person to see it instead of being scared. Be like, I think that's for me.
Oh yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing all that. Will you tell me a little bit more about what you're doing now?
Oh, absolutely. So about 4 months ago, I kind of put on hold my company, which is helping communities decentralize, that I just started because I wanted to work with so many projects and it was just impossible to like come on full time for every project, obviously. And also community building and kind of this whole governance, building governance and so on. It's not a job that a company needs full time. Like you need an expert that will really focus and design the strategy, but it's not like that expert needs to spend all of their time doing just that. So I wanted to work with a lot of projects, but then I was headhunted by ConsenSys, and I thought, you know what? It's a big company. We can say a lot of things, but if you want to have impact on the industry, you might as well be friends with the big ones. And that's how I became the Senior DAO Strategist at ConsenSys.
Cool.
So it's been 4.5 or 5 months now. It's a pretty exciting ride.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like ConsenSys has done a lot of really important work specifically on kind of like the enterprise space and helping bring some of these, I guess, like larger, more traditional organizations, getting them exposure to the space, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that ConsenSys has done this very impressive thing of building tooling for Ethereum community, which really helped with adoption and that kind of, even if you take things like ConsenSys Academy, how many people have got onboarded to it? Truffle, another like project that really brought a lot of Infura, similar thing, right?
Yep.
So there are all of those projects or tools that they've built which really helped with adoption of the technologies and spreading the word. And also, by being a big brand, wanted or not, other enterprise type companies are really much more comfortable talking to ConsenSys rather than talking to, some random DAO, or not random, maybe a brilliant DAO, but a DAO that doesn't come with the brand or doesn't come with the legal infrastructure that is needed for collaboration, which is a big problem of our industry right now. And I am really encouraged in a way to see how open the whole company is to really dive deeper into the Web3 and not only sell tools, but actually participate and be a contributor, not be a seller, but be a contributor, be a meaningful contributor. I mean, we just launched recently our Web3 contribution policy, by which every employee is strongly encouraged. We can't force anything, but we are strongly encouraged to spend at least 1 day a month working on Web3 projects not connected to our day-to-day work. And I'm not saying well, I wrote the strategy, but I'm not saying it's, oh, Marta, you or Matt or someone like that, oh, you go and do it. Because obviously we do it every day, all day long. But it's like you're Karen from finance and you're Shai from events. They actually are there learning and trying to build things for Web3, which is just awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think not to just keep, throwing love on ConsenSys, but I do actually think that's been another important role that ConsenSys has played is onboarding people into Web3 by basically giving them a job. Like the number of people who run important protocols, DAOs, et cetera, now that got their start basically through ConsenSys back when there wasn't a ton of jobs in Ethereum, is huge. And it sounds like that tradition continues.
Oh yeah. And I mean, it's very selfish in a way because you want the top talent, and how do you attract the top talent? I mean, it's both ways, but it is cool. And it's cool to see those people kind of leaving doing their project and then coming back after a few years. So it's just cool. It's nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, so your title is Senior DAO Strategist. That is a pretty dope title. I like it.
Tell that to HR. They are not very happy.
I imagine it breaks from the typical org chart a little bit. Talk about jobs that didn't exist 10 years ago. It's truly, if you told people that 10 years ago, they'd be like, what?
Well, yeah, when I told my parents that I'm becoming the Senior DAO Strategist, like, oh, senior, that's great. We're happy for you.
At least it's got senior in the title. And strategy is good too.
Yeah.
That's cool. So tell me more about what you do. What, it sounds like you kind of help craft this policy to encourage contribution. What are your other focuses?
Yeah, so basically the whole plan is to become a meaningful contributor, as I mentioned, and builder within the space. And my role was created we have this really awesome crypto economic team, basically, which sits kind of outside of the traditional, we have our projects like Infura, like Diligence, and so on. But in addition to that, we have this funny little thing that is called the crypto economic team. It's 15 of us, and we are all geeks in their own way. And most of my colleagues are just those brilliant crypto econ people that sit there and do the market analysis and the portfolio strategy and all that stuff that I sit in the meetings whoa, I need to record it and re-listen 5 times and then get a dictionary and maybe understand it. But in addition to that, we have the Web3 and DAO kind of part of the team, which is me and my colleague Matt Wright, that obviously you know very well.
Yep.
And so my responsibility is to define the plan for ConsenSys to both participate in Web3 in various different forms, and it's kind of I have the freedom to say what those forms would be. And then on the other hand, how do we leverage the inventions of Web3 to build better products and to internally run our projects better. And that's all of the stuff around like launching our internal DAOs and doing kind of DAO days and engagement and so on. And Matt is focused on really building relationships with DAOs, while I think more about how do we make projects out of it.
Cool. Cool. That's super interesting. Are there any examples that you can point to as far as like ways that ConsenSys is contributing to DAOs or forming DAOs, or vice versa, like products or services that you're building in for ConsenSys teams?
So, well, the Web3 contribution and also the governance participation policy that we created is another really cool one, where we realized that in our portfolio, through the MetaMask swaps and other ways, we have a lot of different tokens. Like it's
interesting.
not ETH, not only ETH, right?
Yeah.
We have a plethora of tokens.
That's cool.
And so we can actually participate in a very meaningful way in governance of a lot of projects.
That's awesome.
But how do you define which ones are the top priority? How do you find the right policies and vote in a way that is not only good for the community, but also matches our internal, beliefs or the ways that we want to this world to look like, right? So our priorities. So we have folks working on that and trying to understand what is the best outcome. We've voted in a few cases. I think we've done like 4 or 5 votes now, and we're doing everything extremely transparent. So we participate with our public kind of wallets. It's not in any way hidden. We publish blog posts about each of the votes with kind of analysis. Why did we vote this way or not the other? So that's one thing that we do. There are 2 DAOs that have been, well, 3 actually, but 2 since I joined that have been officially launched. There is the Education DAO and there's the Village DAO. So Education DAO is a project of a lot of my colleagues from the ConsenSys Academy. They were running boot camps and things like that. And they were creating a DAO to run boot camps and create educational material for the public and kind of engage people. So it's really cool kind of collaborative effort in terms of education, which I think is really missing from our space still.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the Village DAO is focused on building customer support products or services to different brands by kind of crowdsourcing the expertise and knowledge. So the DAO is basically like gathering of experts that can learn and provide customer support to different brands. So it's not only to other DAOs, but it's also like your, potentially like Amazon or Facebook, or well, hopefully not Facebook, but some of those big brands, right? So these are the 2 that are official and have launched already. The Village DAO launched at Permissionless. So awesome. That we had a good party there. And internally, I am hoping that in Q3, I guess if we are coming up to Q3, we will be able to launch a bigger kind of industry-wide survey to talk in a very honest way about what is missing from this space. Not because we want to now, get everybody's ideas and build tools for Web3. That's definitely not why. But so that we can all start sharing what tools are we using, why are we doing it. Messari did this amazing, I'm sure you saw the compilation of all the tools available, but there are like almost 1,000 tools there. Yep. Like, how do we start converging into something that is more of an industry standard in different places? So that's hopefully, where we can also define, where should we go? And definitely, there's a lot of enthusiasm in the company and from our head of the strategy and so on in terms of like engaging with Web3. But also, at the end of the day, we realize that a lot of the projects are better run not as DAOs, right? There is the downside, there is the social cost to running a DAO, or overhead, not cost, but an overhead of trying to do everything in a decentralized way, as you well know. So definitely, we are not like gonna all of a sudden build all of the tools as DAOs. That's a step too far.
Yeah, that's amazing, though. That sounds like y'all are working on a number of different projects. Would love to follow up actually on each of them. So I'm very interested in this consensus governance participation that kind of arises as a result of the MetaMask swap project. First of all, thanks for doing that. I think it sounds like y'all are aware of this, but like it's kind of like risky in some ways to participate in governance, especially as I guess like a big company or some kind of like institution, I think people are sort of like suspicious, in some ways,
Yeah.
like not of ConsenSys specifically, but like you see this in Uniswap governance, right?
Yeah.
There's this meme of like A16Z controls Uniswap governance,
Yeah.
And so I think it's like brave, I guess, or like bold that y'all are taking that step. And I think even though it can be hard, I think you're doing the community a service by actually using, right, the tokens that you have and putting them to work. And also, it sounds like building some interesting best practices. I think maybe people would be less suspicious of institutions if they all publish blog posts about like why they voted a certain way and were like thoughtful about why they're voting the way they are and like how that aligns with their values. So first of all, thank you for doing that. I think it's awesome. And second of all, like would love to dig in. So is there like a team of people at ConsenSys who kind of like decide what to vote? Or is there like one person who's kind of like the governance specialist, writes up a recommendation and then like shares it with some other people? Or like how does that work internally?
Yeah, so it's still early days, and
Sure.
we have a lot of ambition, but we are a small team, right?
Sure.
So we are just in the process of actually getting someone on board who will be the governance manager and will be responsible for doing all of that analysis. Right now is a joint effort of our kind of the investment team that is looking at how is our portfolio structured, and then myself and Matt's on kind of the community aspects of it. But effectively, it is someone finds a vote that seems interesting, or maybe the team that is putting up the proposal kind of contacts us
Right.
and says like, "Hey guys, we put up this proposal. It would be really awesome if you took a look. No pressure either way, but if you would want to evaluate it." And we have the priority of like these are like the top 10, and they are quite obvious which 10, right? Top 10 projects that we want to be involved with as first step.
Yep.
And then after that, we have a framework of evaluating it, asking the certain questions. So the person evaluating it has to like go through them step by step and be like, okay, this is like this meets our whatever requirements, this doesn't, but this is the implication. How does it impact decentralization? Are we like are we going to like go against the community? And if we are, why are we doing that? Or are we going with the community? Is that the wise thing to do? So all sort of things, but it's very structured. Basically, it's like a form almost that you fill out, and then that gets submitted to our finance team that controls the wallets, and they do the vote based on that, and then we write the blog post. So it's a fairly simple process.
Yeah, that's great though.
It's very bootstrapped out in some ways, and I mean I agree with you. There is this difficulty that we have that like we have created so many DAOs, and it's awesome, right? Everybody can create a DAO. And as we launched our first kind of the DAO day, so the Web3 contribution day, we already have like 5 employees being like, oh, I want to set up my DAO. How do I do it? I'm like, have you thought of exactly what it is? It's like, where's the guide? I really want to do it, right? So that's awesome. On the other hand, there are like on Deep DAO, there are like over 4,000, almost 5,000 DAOs out there. There's a crazy number, and the number of people who can actually devote their focus or participation into those projects. It's a limited number. I mean, our space is still small. It's growing, but it's still small. Yes. So now what comes from that is that, and everybody gets involved in like 10, easily, probably 10 DAOs. So now you're being asked to contribute and to vote, more important, like participate in the governance process of those 10 DAOs. Imagine you spend 1 hour a day, 30 minutes a day on each of those projects. That's like 5 hours a day, every single day. And you still need the full-time job, right? So that's where the whole kind of the peril of having delegated governance comes from, right? We need to have a way to like, I trust you, let's like, you will vote in my name. But now I gave you my vote, someone else gave you their vote, right? And all of a sudden we have A16Z that is controlling most of the governance of major projects. On one hand, great, because they have the team and the time to devote to it. On the other hand, how decentralized is that governance, right? So that's a very tricky thing that I think DAOs will need to start figuring out very soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I think though, like a big theme that's emerging for me in these conversations, and I think we'll see it at DAO NYC as well, is like it's good that you're doing it. It's like there are these challenges. I think we all see kind of like the reason for delegating to representatives, but then at the same time, like it's hard to maintain decentralization and like there are all these trade-offs. But at the same time, I think like we are going to find solutions. And the only way we're going to is by trying.
Yeah.
It's like using the example of someone at ConsenSys who's like, oh, I've got my DAO day, time to build a DAO. It's like, it's, in my opinion, smart to try contributing to some
Yeah.
first because the problems are really quite idiosyncratic and quite specific. It's like you really have to like be in there, actually trying to figure out how to make DAOs work in order to like build an effective one or just like push the industry forward. So appreciate that y'all are doing that. Before we move on, we'd love to ask a little bit maybe about the education DAO. Totally agree that education is not a solved problem in the Web3 space by any stretch of the imagination. So tell me a little bit more about like how the DAO structure plays into that. I'm sure it's relatively early on, but like kind of what you're thinking there.
Yeah, so basically right now we have the ConsenSys Academy is a branch of ConsenSys that has been running for quite a while, did all of the courses, all of the cool stuff. But it's easier to kind of spread the love and get more people involved for micro projects rather than have full-time staff developing it. And also just kind of understanding the needs of the local kind of groups, right? So Ethereum course for people in New York will be very different to Ethereum course for kids in like Poland, let's say, right? Education is different, expectations are different, language is different, culture is different. So the idea is to get, for now, it is gated for the people who have either worked for ConsenSys Academy at some point in time or are alumni of ConsenSys Academy or participated in the boot camps. So in some way they understand the way that the education has been created or the educational courses have been created. And so they are now getting together and trying to work in kind of sprints of 4 weeks, kind of coincides with the DAO days, because they really embrace the whole concept of DAO days, and they are running their own DAO day in parallel for their DAO, which is like their big huddle for people to like get together, figure out what they want to work on, and then work in 4 week sprints.
Cool.
So yeah, they just work in different topics. Anybody can propose a topic, and hopefully soon participants of the DAO will be able to run the boot camps, so in-person events or online events.
Awesome. That sounds great. Any resources we can develop towards education, I think are well worth it for the space. Cool. Well, thanks for diving into all that with me. Sounds like y'all are doing some really interesting work. You got a powerhouse team, you and Matt, like pretty good crew right there. So that's awesome. I would love to ask you a two-part question. So the first part is like, what really inspires you about working in the Web3 space? What kind of motivates you or like makes it, you stoked to get out of bed in the morning? And then the second part is what's one challenge or like thing that you don't like or like frustrates you about the space that you're hoping we can resolve sometime in the future?
Just one.
Yeah. I mean, you can go off, go off if you want to like go on more than one, but at least one.
Okay.
I'm here all afternoons.
Yeah, I like ranting. So what gets me out of bed is the promise that Web3 still offers, the promise of leveraging the barriers to entry for people and to giving us an opportunity to rethink how we organize and how do we run companies. My kind of spending many years at the Linux Foundation, before being a security researcher, before that helping set up the first free and open source foundation in Poland. Open source is very close to my heart, and I really believe that if there is one way to do things, it's the open source way, and it's always better. I believe that in life. I believe in transparency in life. It keeps you out of trouble.
Yep.
So I love that about what Web3 can offer. It's giving us the space and kind of the privilege of thinking, what if we ran everything in that open way, in that transparent way? And it doesn't necessarily have to be, oh yeah, we have to have smart contracts and all of the kind of the very technological level of it. From a human perspective, I like that type of organization and the opportunity that it gives us to kind of rethink the way that people work. Because like all the time, I was talking to someone about it recently, like every time someone joins a company and gets a full-time job, how much of that time do you spend actually doing what you're good at versus all the bloody emails that you have to write and sit in all of these meetings that are unnecessary, but well, because your position is X, people think, oh, I'll just loop you in, I'll just drag you in, where we could spend exactly the amount of time that we need to spend on that project and then move on to the next one which needs your attention. And of course it's difficult because everybody needs some spare time to kind of have the capacity to think, and some people are just good, especially when it comes to like coders and stuff. That's actually a full-time job and it's really hard to switch between projects. But maybe you're an expert in like UI design and you don't have to constantly work on that one project. So being part of the decentralized economy or the economy of doers, so being in a duocracy setting rather than meritocracy or a democracy or anything like that. I really love that about Web3. I find it very inspiring to rethink how we run projects, because if you look at companies, I've worked for some of the biggest ones and some of the smallest ones, there is this thing of like a company gets set up, has like 2 or 3 founders, right? Then it goes up to, oh, we have a hiring spur, so we get to 10, then we get some funding, we go to 20, and about 50 is where I usually see companies really struggle. Like between 50 and 500 is the worst. And then after you go above like 400 or 500, you become just anonymous, you have no impact, but it's so big that it's really hard to fall in a way, right? So if we can...
That's so true. Sorry to interrupt. I just like left a company after 8 years going through all those stages, and definitely resonates.
Yeah. So that's why I think that if we could kind of reason why those fall apart is not necessarily because the magic number of 400, but because people can hide and people can just like not do their stuff and you can't see it. Now, if we run everything in a kind of decentralized manner where you contribute what you can and then go, if you stop contributing, that's okay, because that becomes a gap for someone else to join in and contribute. You can't kind of sit on that particular topic, right? And if you do, people will notice that this isn't being done. So I think that is really kind of encouraging for me, because then you can have 1,000 people company, and if 1,000 people do their one thing really well, we're in a much better place. So that's what I love.
I love that take. I think I feel very similarly. For me, it's a question of like, how do we scale organizations? Because if you look at the world's largest organizations today, like the U.S. government or the CCP or big religions like Catholic Church, et cetera, big companies like Google or Walmart, right? I'm just throwing out like the biggest institutions in the world, giant nonprofits, like they're extremely inefficient.
Yes.
They're still better than like having no institutions. Like it's good that we have these things on some level, but like exactly what you're describing, like the gap between like all the people that work there and the output is insane. Like it is so wide, and yeah, there has to be a better way, right? So like, and that's what keeps me hopeful with DAOs. It's like, it's hard. There's challenges, but like, we're not competing with anything that's like that hard to beat. Like fundamentally, like it's hard to beat a startup. Like it's unfair, right? People are like comparing DAOs to tech startups, which are like some of the most efficient organizations in the world, like sub 50 employees, like you're describing. But like really, we're competing with like governments and massive enterprises that are just, we should be able to like improve upon that.
It might be a little bit controversial, but you know what's on a large scale, what are some of the most efficient organizations out there?
Military?
Mafia.
Oh, even spicier than military. I like it.
And that's because there's a certain amount of autonomy and kind of pockets of people working together that have to achieve a certain goal, but those pockets they're set in stone. Like and some people are incentivized but not forced to do things, right?
It's like more decentralized. Yeah. Wow. That would be like a banger like tweet thread. Like why DAOs should be more like the mafia. Thread symbol.
And that's how the Web3 came to end.
This is why you need to have an alt, so you can publish it from that instead of anyway.
So yeah, I think that this is something that is the most fun thing about DAOs: the privilege and opportunity to rethink how we organize people. Now, what are the things that are not so great? Well, we suck at it. I mean, right? It's just like we have this opportunity and it's great. And we are really like so many brilliant people are doing so many cool things. And I love how we are kind of giving ourselves the ability to fail and to try and to fail again. But in the process, it's a teething problem. We still lack the UI. We still lack the kind of, we want to be very inclusive, but we're not. Like, if someone wants to join a DAO, the reason why we are doing all of that education and the DAO days and all that is because you can't just tell employees. That's something that me and Matt learned very quickly. You can't just tell employees, oh, go contribute to Web3. Because, like, how? When? So now in parallel to having this contribution policy, we are running a whole massive program of every month having talks, education series, co-working sessions, and it's becoming like a full-time job to just create that. And hopefully we can just open it up and introduce it to the wide world rather than just keeping it internal.
Cool.
But it is a massive undertaking because it's not there. And because people are still, why we love collaborating within the Web3 space, it is still quite isolated, and every project is secretly competing with the other project. So if they figured out a way to do something in there like very effectively, they don't go off being like, hey, our governance process is the best one, and everybody's super engaged. Everybody's like sitting quietly and being like, yeah, our governance process sucks, but we're not going to talk about it. Why not? Why not create a governance forum where we actually talk about those things? So I think that these are the things that, it's not really frustrating. I have I'm 33. I'm very old in this space.
Yeah, same. I'm a boomer.
So I have the maturity to say, okay, I'll just wait and it will get resolved, and it might not be as fast as the world expects us. On the other hand, that's another kind of argument that people have against Web3 is just like, oh, you haven't figured out everything. Well, neither has the internet, and it's been around for a little bit longer than we, right? Let's just give ourselves some time and space to figure those things out. So, yeah, these are like, it's not that it's frustrating, it's just we need more time. And it's like, I have a lot of enthusiasm and I want to like get everybody enthusiastic about it. But then sometimes people throw at me arguments. I'm like, well, you're kind of right. Just wait and see and you'll understand why it's really cool.
Yeah. What you were saying about governance, like the example of like, it's not actually open necessarily because projects are competing with each other. It kind of reminds me of what you're saying about open source. Like you're kind of advocating like, can we do everything open source, not just the code, but our governance, what we're learning about community, et cetera, et cetera. Cool. Well, thanks. Last question for you, not crypto related necessarily. I mean, you could make it crypto related if you want, but what is your favorite place in the world and why?
It's in a way of crypto related. Next year, I have 2 stepkids, so they have to go to university. And once that happens, I'm embarking on a nomadic lifestyle because I love the world. I don't have a favorite place, so I'm decentralizing myself in a way.
Cool.
So I lived in a lot of places. I love San Francisco. That feels very much close to home. I like where I am right now in Cambridge as well. My favorite place in the world is being in a boat on a river because I row. So
cool.
That's the most fun thing to do.
Cool, like a river, not like whitewater, but like crew or both.
No,
Okay.
I mostly row in a crew in an
Okay.
8, but wide
cool.
rivers and narrow rivers.
Yeah.
Yeah. But being in a boat early in the morning is one of the most amazing things you can do.
That's awesome. Are you able to do that like in Oxford pretty regularly?
Yeah, I do it. Well, I represent the city of Cambridge, so I do it in Cambridge 4 times a week or 5 times a week, and then compete
Nice.
around the world. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. It's the most unique answer I've gotten so far.
Yes.
In a boat. I tell everyone to interpret place loosely, like could be whatever you want, but everyone's given me a city, so I like it. Cool. All right. Thanks, Marta. Great to see you, and I hope that you have an awesome week. Looking forward to your panels and everything at DAO NYC.
Thank you so much for having me, and good luck with Tally.
Cool. Thanks, Marta.